Hey guys, this is Russ with HealthForward Online, and today I want to bring you guys a lecture on supplements. So if you're into cycling, if you're into running or triathlons, doesn't matter what it is, if you consider yourself an athlete or not, you just want to hear more information about supplements, then take a listen to this video. I think you'll enjoy it. I recorded this last week at a lecture that was held at AthletiCamps. Got the shirt on here. So AthletiCamps is a cycling, coaching, and cycling camps place, and the owner, Bruce Handler, does an excellent job of providing cycling training and coaching. So check him out. I'll put a link down below so you can check him out, and then also at the end of this video I'll put all the information on how you can get a hold of him and all the things he's doing. And one of the things that goes on there is there's a series of lectures. And Marlia is the one that gave this lecture, and she talked about supplements. Marlia is a registered dietitian and she has a PhD in nutritional biology. I think I got that right. I hope I did. So anyways, take a listen. I think you'll enjoy this. If you're taking any supplements and want to find out more information about maybe what you're taking, then I think this will be very informative for you. She's going to talk about all kinds of stuff: vitamin A, C, vitamin D. She'll talk about caffeine. She'll talk about branched chain amino acids. Let's see, all kinds of stuff: DHEA, ornithine, omega-3s, and there you go. So enjoy the video.
Class number 3, focusing on supplementation, which Marlia will talk a little bit more about what she's going to specifically talk about. First class, we talked about the weight loss. Second was the time trialing. Third one will be supplementation. Fourth one's going to be very bike race oriented, called athlete versus competitor. And the fifth,
psychiatrist.
oh yeah, psychologist. And the fifth one will be focusing on bike nutrition and on bike supplementation. So specifically for that, which as we go into the season is obviously very, very important. So again, thank you for coming. I'll do it now because people are still here, in the sense that the Gerstein stuff is 15% off tonight. T-shirts are $10. And diet analysis by Marlia is $25 off. Just mention that you were here. I have all the names, but it doesn't matter. Just mention you were here. Not a problem. We invite you to ask questions. It's a learning opportunity. She's fantastic. Who was here 2 weeks ago, or 4 weeks ago now, 2 sessions ago. So take advantage of having Marlia here, and I'll let her introduce with her credentials and get started.
Thanks for coming again. Appreciate it. Anybody that was not here the first time I spoke on weight loss? Yeah. Okay, so I guess thanks, Bruce. So I've been working with Bruce since really AthletiCamps was created. I work with UC Davis Health System as a registered dietitian, and in one of the 5 clinics I work in, I also work in UC Davis Sports Medicine, where I work with athletes, and that's where I met Bruce. I also have a doctorate in nutritional biology from UC Davis, and I'm a certified specialist in sports dietetics through the American Dietetic Association. The first class I spoke about weight loss. Today I'm going to focus on supplementation, all the little pill products and things that we look for. And then the next one we're going to talk about the nutrition on the bike and focus on the before, during, after, optimizing recovery, and so on and so forth. So today I'm going to talk a lot. I was kind of laughing with Bruce. I was doing this presentation and I had a slide on chitosan. I'm like, who really cares about chitosan anymore? Because that's way old and nobody wants to know that. A lot of people want to know about what helps with weight loss, what helps with muscle tissue, what helps with antioxidant stuff. Do I really need extra this and extra that? So I'm hoping that I can provide enough research for you to make a decision as to whether you want to apply it or not apply it. And the trick with supplements is really what is seen in research, the amount, and what is you're actually purchasing and consuming. Big difference. You do a research study looking at 50 grams a day, see trends, blah, 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 and you buy it in 2-gram increments. So the likelihood of you seeing the trend on your 2 grams versus 50 grams is minimal. But how do you know that? You don't. Companies make stuff, they sell it, but they're not going to put on their cited papers or whatnot. You have to really be familiar with the literature to understand what is the most, and you'll hear me say the term effective dose for the results that that particular product is trying to attain. So certainly couldn't talk about supplements if we didn't talk about just some statements that are on products. Supplements are not regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA only intervenes if there's some kind of unsafe product or they've had repeated complaints, adverse events, if they have a supplement that is not on their dietary supplement list that doesn't fall into their vitamins and minerals and herbs, that's when the FDA comes in. Other than that, they have to have a few claims, and they're supposed to communicate with the FDA about their product, what they're selling, but other than that, there's not a lot of policing. So a dietary supplement is intended to supplement the diet that contains one of the following: vitamins, minerals, herbs, other botanical products, amino acids, metabolites, either are byproducts of metabolism as an example, concentrates, extracts, and other dietary substances. So pretty vague. They have a long list of what that would include, so if someone's making a product, they have to at least have something in their product that's on that list. They can't just bring something from Europe and plop it in there without having the FDA know about that. So the supplement dates back to 1994. Supplements may carry statements of nutritional support, such as talking about structure and function, but not claims of drug-like effects. It's going to cure or it's going to alleviate. It may support. It may help statements, very kind of vague statements. And the disclaimer is mandatory in all products, that you are taking a product that has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. And the whole issue around Food and Drug Administration and products, especially herbs, are a very big challenge to try and control. We have genus and species differences, and whether it's the leaf, whether it's the bark, whether it's the juice, all sorts of components of plants that may or may not have the effective substance. But trying to control that whole group is very, very difficult. Many people have tried to push legislation for that and have failed. So the Act provisions, again, FDA does not approve of statements of nutritional support, but the FDA can object to them. So again, if it's a statement of curing, it acts as a laxative, as an example, then they'll step in. But if it says it supports bowel health, that's okay. Manufacturers must be able to substantiate their structure function statements and that they're truthful, but they have to be asked for them. They're not just going to put them up on their website and make them available. So in examples of claims, again, effect on disease may promote urinary tract health is okay, but if it protects against urinary tract infections, that's acting like a drug-like effect, then that's not okay. The same thing would be it promotes regularity rather than it saying it's a laxative. So we have to be careful. Again, these products, whether they're herbs or whether they're in a capsule or a pill form, there's other issues of quantity, purity, and quality. You may be getting 4 milligrams of X, but you're really not guaranteed there's 4 milligrams of X in that pill. There's no control around that. There was a study done probably almost 8 years now looking at products, and the likelihood of them containing what's on the label was very, very small. So you run the risk of, a capsule full of dirt, maybe some heavy metals, but maybe not actually what you think you're purchasing. So trying to get around that, how do you guarantee a high-quality supplement, is pretty challenging. The more products the company makes, a little bit more reliable. There's a couple of stamps you can look at. There's the Good Housekeeping stamp, meaning they follow some manufacturing processes that are appropriate. The United States Pharmacy is stamped, or USP stamp is another stamp of security, but you're still delving into products that are not regulated. And there's been a couple examples, and you can go to the FDA website just to show you. But for example, there have been a couple of supplements that have been pulled because they actually have drugs in them. Sibutramine is a weight loss drug that was pulled last fall because of heart issues, palpitations, blood pressure, so on and so forth. But there was a drug called, or a supplement called Cellulite Slimming Capsules that had sibutramine in them. So they had to get pulled from the market. There was another one, the Fruta Planta supplements, sibutramine in them as well. And there's lots of, for you men out there, lots of directed substances for man up now. That will bite me in the butt on YouTube, I can imagine. That contain the same substance as Viagra. So it's advertised as a supplement, but it actually contains an active drug. Therefore, it is not. It's no longer a supplement. So. So there's a lot on their website. There's a couple, like the whole HCG thing right now for weight loss. The FDA just published an article that all of those claims are false. There's no literature to suggest their benefit. But you have to be kind of up on your news or scanning the FDA or getting to get those messages too. So it's kind of, you got to either look for them or maybe just be a random and hear those sorts of things. But there's a lot of stuff out there. In the sense of, they advertise big changes, but look at our population. Is it really going to be that effective? The FDA just disapproved of another weight loss drug this week. There's very little substances that are actually going to produce a result when it comes to weight loss without damaging your heart and your blood vessels. So we're going to talk about a number of categories today that I thought would be relevant. Certainly muscle mass stuff, strength, speed, a little contraindication in the sense of cyclists want to be small, but we want muscle, but then muscle mass weighs more. We don't want to carry that up a hill, so we have kind of a challenge there. Certainly we're always looking to reduce fat. We don't want to have muscle breakdown, so what can we do to have something that's anti-catabolic? A little bit to touch on the androgens, growth hormone releasers. Again, I'm not here to talk about injectable substances that are prescribed by a physician. Dr. Nabazio can touch on that. These are oral forms that we're going to discuss today. Antioxidants, talk about some factors associated with endurance, and then touch a little bit on health, because there's been a few changes in vitamin and mineral requirements. So creatine, very common one. You know, might be in the off-season doing some weightlifting. Might be doing it just to keep up some muscle tissue too. Certainly has, if we look at creatine, creatine's a very fast source of energy. We break down glucose, we make energy. We break down fat, it takes longer to make energy, but we can make energy very quickly from creatine. And that's the advantage behind the supplementation. You add more creatine to your muscle cells, you can produce more energy very quickly and accomplish a goal. Studies have shown it does increase muscle mass. A few years ago was some discussion. Mass, water. Mass, water. Mass, water. Now we're actually seeing changes in body fat composition, improvement in lean mass, and not so much on the all water weight. Certainly more muscle tissue, you have more glycogen and more water stored with that, but we do see improvements in lean body mass with creatine supplementation. So the thing is, though, this is where it's, besides the mass thing for the cyclist is not going to truly benefit from creatine supplementation for that 30-second sprint for the free pair of tires at the finish line, or the round of criterium corner as an example. The athletes that's going to improve from this is your 50-meter swimmer, your track star, the shot putter. Very short bursts of energy, because we use up so quickly, it doesn't regenerate itself. It just is used up, and then it takes time to regenerate, but we can't sustain that. It's more of an anaerobic supplement in the sense of energy production. It takes a lot of oxygen to burn fat. We don't need oxygen to burn glucose, but it takes a little bit longer to use creatine as a source of energy because it requires no oxygen. So we can do some sprinting, and that, creatine's a benefit. But in the middle of a 2-hour workout and you want to chase someone up a hill, creatine's not going to play a role at that point. So we have to just keep in mind what it typically is useful for. So creatine through consumption. In the muscle tissue, you superload the muscle tissue with creatine, and then ATP production is made, and that's what's required for muscle contraction. So if you have extra creatine in the muscle, you're able to contract more, be stronger, push more, sprint faster. Then the byproducts of creatine are then flushed out through the kidney. As a side note, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago, there were a couple of kids in the Midwest that were creatine, supplementing with creatine. They're wrestlers, so they want the mass, but they don't want the fat. So they dehydrated themselves, right? They spit in cups and run in trash bags, and they try and manipulate their diet to optimize their training, and they actually died from basically kidney damage. It's not totally related to the creatine. It's creatine on top of dehydration and other factors. So it's just something to consider. Especially then if you have kids at home, they're dibble-dabbling in this stuff, you know, their friends, brothers. Somebody's coming over and offering them, and we have to keep in mind these supplements are not trialed in under 18. I certainly wouldn't sign my kid up for a study. We just see observational studies. The effective dose is the first 5 days you do about 20 grams a day. Then you have a maintenance dose of about 2 to 5 grams per day. This is typically cycled because usually the athlete has a goal. They're training for a particular event. They're trying to max out at a certain heat or a certain track meet, and that's where they cycle that through. Your body naturally makes it, so you do need to back off on a bit, but for a period of time, and then you can reload as you attain a new goal or a new competition. It's optimized when taken with carbohydrate because we also see carbohydrate glycogen storage. It actually also facilitates creatine into the muscle tissue where we want it. So you'll typically see a lot of powders with creatine, carbohydrate, protein in them as well. But the idea is that if you're taking a pill of creatine, again, probably 2 grams, you need 20 for a loading dose in particular. You need to be taking some carbohydrate, fruit smoothie, glass of milk, something of that nature to optimize absorption. There are lots of other substances too, HmB. See, a lot of these are in the powdered mixes. We may not necessarily be taking an individual capsule of each, but we have a nice laundry list on the food label of these products. This is particular metabolite of branched chain amino acid leucine. We'll talk more about branched chain amino acids. It's actually converted to HmG-CoA reductase, which is the rate-limiting enzyme for cholesterol production. Now, any of you on statins, we're actually targeting this enzyme to get it to stop producing cholesterol. The idea behind this is that it facilitates the regeneration of cells because it's helping with the production of cholesterol, which cells need. Every cell needs cholesterol in the membrane in particular. So, in particular, potentially increasing skeletal muscle. So the possibility of doing that certainly exists. The typical dosage through research is shown to be about 3 grams per day over several days through the study period. And the studies find that there's reduced muscle breakdown. So that's positive. We see reduced markers related to muscle damage, like creatine kinase. We'll talk about branched chain amino acids do the same thing. So increase in fat-free mass. So again, almost a bit anti-catabolic. We have less breakdown, therefore we have better retention of the muscle mass that we have and more to build on as we keep training. And there, since less muscle breakdown, we actually have improved muscle strength. So the dose is about 3 grams per day, and that's what these studies are finding for this particular supplement. Now, will your weight change? Maybe. Yeah, maybe if we're retaining and putting on a little bit more mass, just like with the creatine. So that, again, this balance of being a cyclist, light, less weight to carry up hills versus power. Conjugated linoleic acid is another common supplement used for mass, strength, speed, arena. The effects of it or its actual mechanisms unclear at this point. We can find through some supplementation, we see some changes, some benefits. There's lots of benefits in animal studies, and I don't report a lot on animal studies because I don't consider myself a rodent. So I'm not going to think that what helps with a rat is going to actually help me. We have a lot of different metabolic systems. If you look at rat studies, the dose per kilo is far more than what you see for yourself in a lifetime. So the comparison is kind of challenging. So there's limited human studies on this. If some of the findings show 6 grams per day, did improve immune status as well as during resistance training in particular to retention of some muscle tissue as well. But the mechanism's vague. The results are relatively inconsistent when it comes to the human population. And this is just naturally found in the diet anyway. It's not necessarily something you have to supplement with. Certainly lots of different proteins out there. Whey, casein, and soy are probably your top 3 proteins. There's lots of other vegetable-type proteins like pea protein, PEA. So the trick is whey protein over time has shown to be one of the most reliant sources of well-digested, well-absorbed, well-utilized, meaning really high bioavailability for muscle deposition and recovery. The trick is, how much do you need of this? Maybe none if you're already doing pretty well on your protein intake. The powders I typically recommend more for convenience. We're missing, the meals are fast changing, you throw some powder in a couple cartons of milk in your little container and some vegetables and blah, 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 and not have to feel like you gotta cook the chicken breast and go through the whole ordeal. So they're more convenience. It's not that you have to have whey protein to have more muscle tissue. It's really, if you're not getting enough protein for various reasons, convenience, time, preparation, don't have to turn on a stove, those sorts of things. Yeah?
How much is enough?
Well, protein-wise, athletes, endurance athletes need 1.2 to 1.4 grams of protein per kilo. And that's your weight divided by 2.2. That is the recommendation for endurance athletes. For strength training athletes, it's up to 1.6, 1.8, maybe 2.0.
Per day.
Per day. The idea behind that, too, is also that you're evenly distributing that protein at all your meals. This protein is a very important part of the recovery, the feelings of fullness, senses of alertness as well. Yeah?
You walk in the store, everything's whey protein. What's the difference in that and going with a soy or something? What's the difference?
Well, when you're talking about whey and casein and soy, we're really talking about changes and differences in amino acids. Soy protein is relatively comparable to an animal product in the sense of it being complete of all 9 essential amino acids. However, I did my dissertation on soy, and I had a lot of dropouts from soy protein because it causes gastrointestinal distress, and people don't feel very comfortable with soy protein powder. Others were fine. But if you look at just the research around protein supplementation, whey usually comes out on top of the 3 for muscle deposition, tolerance, just being bioavailable. Doesn't mean that you have to do that. You can certainly try other proteins as a way to meet protein needs. Yeah?
Is it true that soy lowers testosterone?
Well,
Too much?
that's a good question. When we get into soy, we're, in this particular, talking about steroid hormones. Soy has 2 compounds that are called isoflavones. They're genistein and daisine. And they're about a couple carbons off and a double bond off from estrogen. However, you need about 10,000 of them to be as effective as 1. Now we have, for women and for men too, but we have different volumes. We have 2 estrogen receptors. We have the estrogen alpha and we have the estrogen beta. The estrogen alpha is part of epithelial cells, which includes breast tissue, uterine tissue. That's where soy's been concerned for cancers in that arena. However, it's not as potent on those receptors. The isoflavones are more potent on the beta receptors, which are part of the heart and endothelium. And hence why people typically have lower heart disease risk when they consume soy. Getting along with the testosterone component, certainly you're feeding in hormones. You make a little bit of estrogen, we make a teeny bit of testosterone, but you might be able to change or shift production through feedback. the literature doesn't suggest that. You don't see that as results of soy intake. Soy's been more strongly advertised back in 1995 as heart healthy and cholesterol reduction. It's not as potent anymore, as that meta-analysis had some weak points to it. But it's also been a factor of bone density as well. And so bone and heart are kind of the two components there. But in all the literature, there's really no research you'll see about changes in estrogen levels. It's part of a healthy diet. It's saturated fat-free. It's cholesterol-free. If you buy soy products in general, they're high in fiber, high in calcium. So there's a benefit. But there's the concern for the breast cancer component, family history, personal history. You probably want to moderate. Well, you probably don't want to do the powders. The powders sometimes have those isoflavones a bit more concentrated, whereas the tofu, the soybeans, the edamame is not so concentrated, so it's a bit more safe. The problem with extra protein, though, is you don't store protein as muscle. You have constant protein turnover as we break down, rebuild, breakdown. It's in our muscles, our immune system, our hair, our nails, all of that's protein. Constant turnover. But if we get too much, the nitrogen's pulled off through the urine, and the carbon skeleton, where does that go? Fat. So it's still a balance. And if you're adding more protein in the diet, in the interest of strength training, you're doing 1.8 to 2 grams per kilo, you really need to drink enough fluid to get the kidneys to flush all of that out. So that's important to consider. Nitrogen levels are toxic in the blood, so we have to consider that. So getting excess protein, the kidney's trying to get rid of all that nitrogen. We do have higher risk of dehydration, kidney stones, their family history of those, potential liver damage, and sometimes there's some studies that look at calcium loss as well. Carnitine, another common supplement I see. This goes into the fat reduction group. Carnitine is synthesized from amino acid in the body, and its primary role in the body is to transport long-chain fatty acids into the mitochondria to make ATP. The cells, muscle cells, want ATP. So the idea would be more carnitine, more transportation of fat into the mitochondria, more breakdown of fat for energy. And unfortunately, as common as this product is, there's no evidence of that. No changes in fat mass, no changes in body weight. So that's kind of disappointing because this is I see a number of patients, clients that take this supplement in effort to try and enhance their fat utilization, and there's really no evidence to suggest that. Chromium's been around for a while too. Look for weight loss. It's another mineral. I would say there's a lot of research around chromium supplementation in type 2 diabetes, because it does show improved insulin sensitivity, and type 2 is insulin resistance. So that's been effective. And this is another one of those products of you get a couple grams, but really the research uses 20, 30, 40 grams, and they still can't find a trend or even evidence to suggest it's effective. So at this point, even though it's been advertised that way, for weight loss, it's starting to steer more towards helping diabetics, but at this point it's not going to be a factor in fat reduction and lean mass building. Medium chain triglycerides. I have a lot of athletes that try and do these. There's an athlete that did that race across America, and this is what he kind of lived off of. These medium chain triglycerides are about 6 to 12 carbons long. They're the same, similar fats to dairy products. In a dairy fat form, they're mostly medium chain triglycerides. The nice thing about them, and I've actually increased supplementation of this in patients that have complete GI distress, they have chronic diarrhea, malnutrition. Medium chain triglycerides are easily absorbed. They don't require any kind of bile acids to transport them across the cells. So in the interest of trying to get some quick energy, that might be helpful for the athlete. The other idea is that it crosses that mitochondrial membrane very quickly for ATP production. So supplementation of this would be thinking we can use more fat as a source of energy, maybe conserve some of our carbohydrate or our glycogen stores during physical activity. We might be able to use more fat as a source of energy in the effort of weight loss, but unfortunately there's still no effect, research-wise, on supplementation with this. And the downside to the metabolism of this is it produces ketones, which are very acidic. And so having a higher, more acidity in the blood or lower pH is not necessarily helpful either. The bone has to manage that, the kidneys have to manage that too. During physical activity, you're already a little acidic from all the lactic acid you're producing, and then we're doing this supplement that actually part of the byproduct of metabolism is that, so we have to be kind of careful. So I see clients use this, but again, too, not a lot of research. In fact, none. Yes?
Doesn't high protein diet also create ketoacidosis?
They can. It depends on other nutrients that are coming in. If it's a purely protein diet, then you're really affecting carbohydrate use as a source of energy. You've run out of it. So the body will use, the brain in particular, will use fat as a source of energy. It will convert the amino acids to glucose for a source of energy, and those byproducts are acidic. The ketones from the fat in particular. So you're diabetic who might be insulin dependent, who hasn't eaten in a while, may have, usually in a coma by then, but they're living off of their fat stores, aren't able to get their sugars into their cells for a source of energy, and so ketoacidosis is a side effect of that. HCA, or hydroxycitrate, HCA extract from fruits is the most common product in this particular one. It claims to inhibit weight gain, or fat in particular, reduces appetite, maybe inhibit enzyme and fat storage, but no research. Great claims, but no research. Anti-catabolics, glutamine's a real common supplement. You'll see that in just your general sport drinks sometimes. There's a lot of interesting research about this. This is synthesized from amino acid glutamate, so your body already makes it. We can get it from the diet, but we can also get it from supplements. It's most abundant in skeletal tissue. It's also found in the GI. Your gastrointestinal area will use glutamine as a source of energy. Your immune system will use glutamine as a source of energy as well. Studies show that if you measure glutamine in the blood during physical activity, it's depleted. And the idea behind there is that it's being used as a source of energy, and what if we supplemented that? Would we reduce the use of other nutrients in the body as a source of energy, like muscle tissue? So if we kept up glutamine concentrations in the cells, would we have less muscle damage through the stress of physical activity? And so the idea would be if we supplement, we can maintain that muscle tissue and reduce the actual breakdown during physical activity. And there's some interesting research. Research does confirm the effectiveness of glutamine on the prevention of muscle mass loss. During times of stress, I think bike riding is stressful. So 0.3 grams per kilo per day, or some other studies used this position would be 0.14 grams per pound per day. So there are research studies that support supplementation can help reduce the muscle breakdown. It's actually in conjunction with a few other amino acids such as arginine, ornithine, but glutamine also does that. It is a potential growth hormone releaser, and has shown to potentially increase that concentration, and growth hormone can help with protein synthesis. So possible dual effect. Reduction of being available so we don't use our own muscle tissue as a source of energy possibly, and the breakdown of tissue during stress, but also help with the release of growth hormone in the effort to part of recovery and protein synthesis. Yeah?
I see that a lot, glutamine a lot in recovery drinks.
Uh-huh.
Is this something that should be supplemented on a daily basis and in your recovery drink, or should it just be done daily, or should it just be done in a recovery drink?
Good question. Based on the growth hormone release idea, it would definitely be part of a recovery. Based on the changes in muscle damage, it'd probably be something you would do Usually all these studies look at before, right? They'll dose you before, and then they'll measure you during. So to find these similar results, it would either be part of it or supplement a few hours before your event. To, again, maximize the amount in the muscle cells to reduce the damage of the muscle cell during that period of time.
Marlia, is that the same thing as glutamic acid? Is that different?
Close.
Okay.
It's close. It's, it's going to be metabolically different by a couple of oxygens, but it's similar in the family.
Okay.
But glutamine is going to be your most common product.
So you're saying possibly before and after?
Yeah. If you look at the research looking at muscle changes in muscle damage, it's always before. In the interest of growth hormone, you're looking at after as part of the recovery process, potentially enhancing the release of growth hormone for the improvement of muscle synthesis post-exercise.
How much do you take?
Well, it's based on your body weight.
That's what that is.
Yeah. Yes.
Is it true that glutamine will counteract, like, if you take arginine, it will counteract the effects of the arginine?
It's a good question. A lot of the research studies that I reviewed, a lot of them use both and get positive benefits. So glutamine, arginine, and ornithine have all been commonly related as growth hormone releasers.
I've just heard that you're not supposed to take, you're supposed to take a minimal amount of glutamine in comparison to, arginine or ornithine.
You could really do both. Your body, optimally, absorption-wise, we absorb about 95% of all protein and amino acids. Physiologically going in, it's not really much different. They both actually will potentially do a little bit of the same thing. Yes.
It talks about, you recover better and you can perform better. Is it really how noticeable is it with the research that show? Is somebody, going that much faster, or is it like just fractions of the difference?
Well, what is significant difference, right? So these studies are usually done over a couple of weeks. You'll find gender differences from a number of these studies, and you're really looking at which has a lot, potential error. And Bruce and I talked about body composition, But you could do blood values. They do a lot of creatine kinase measurements of muscle damage as a marker for is it high, is it low, significant difference, p-value less than 0.05. That could be, 1 millimole, So the idea is, in this particular case, are you actually is the performance actually improved? The idea it would be, because we have less muscle damage. But that's where the line connects. We're making the assumption that with less muscle damage, we will see improvement in performance. And though that hasn't really been studied, it's mostly looking at the changes with supplementation, but not their VO2 max or lactate threshold or time to exhaustion with this particular supplement. Yeah.
So basically you're saying it's not necessarily a performance increase, but you can train harder and recover better, so you can increase your performance that route.
Right. We could make some assumptions through that pathway, yes. Everyone get this value. We can all run after GNC. But I don't represent anyone, I just represent facts. That's all I try to do. Ornithine, another, we just mentioned that too. Anti-catabolic, this again, mechanisms unknown, possibly supporting the maintenance of intramuscular glutamine levels. So we're supplementing with glutamine to reduce the depletion of it, to potentially reduce muscle damage. We can maybe supplement with ornithine that will also help reduce glutamine depletion and help reduce muscle damage. Ornithine's also been a factor in growth hormone release. It has been shown to be effective in reducing muscle protein breakdown in catabolic states, cycling, especially hard endurance, long, several-hour training would be definitely catabolic or breaking down at 0.35 grams per kilo or up to, big range, 30 grams per day. With no, and I definitely looked for harmful side effects. Most of these had very little harmful side effects, but I mentioned a few already. But they're pretty safe. Pretty safe.
So
possible.
The bottle says 500 milligrams, so that'd be taking 60 tablets a day?
Awesome. Thanks for making my point.
How expensive does that get?
Right. Point made, right? So we're looking for 30 grams a day, or maybe we have someone here, that's 70 kilos, 120 milligrams. So you're looking at big range here. Milligrams, we have a small amount So it's pretty small. 70 kilo person's not going to require a whole lot. However, there's been research with 30 grams, not 30 milligrams, 30 grams. So pill form, you probably find that dose more in a powder form. Am I saying that 30 is better than the other one? No, I'm just reporting what we see in research. And that's the problem with research, is if we do more, will we see a result? If we do less, will we see a result? Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. You know, and then in reviewing much of this literature, there's quite a bit of positive response in the untrained athlete. So the downside is, and there's hopefully be more and more research looking at trained athletes, but also master athletes. We lose sight sometimes of our target population. We're doing the, research is going on at campus, sign up, got your 19-year-old in there, the 23-year-old in there, and just go, 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 and you're like, I'm going to apply this value to a 55-year-old woman. Yeah, exactly. That doesn't make sense. So that's the challenge with some of this stuff. Yeah.
Years ago, I was told that taking ornithine and arginine together at night would help induce growth hormone release during sleep, when apparently that's when you peak growth hormone releases while you're sleeping.
It's possible. Part of circadian rhythms do follow growth hormone follows that, but arginine and ornithine have definitely been shown to support the release of growth hormone. Yes. Question is how much are you taking and how much is in the literature?
Yeah. But it's together, both together was
yeah,
the point.
Well, you look at the literature, they're separate and together. They have different routes. The arginine also can act as a vasodilator, as a factor in nitric oxide synthase. And that's one other reason why people take arginine. So it's the dual effect. It's also branching off of the growth hormone, but also potentially helping with vasodilation, which may help with circulation and the removal of waste and the transport of nutrients. Yeah.
Besides getting our own PhD, is there a reliable place to go? Like a website or a library or a book or something that you can read and find out what the parameters for these studies were?
So there's a really good website. It's pubmed.gov. And you type in whatever you want. You're going to get published research that has been peer-reviewed, up to date. It'll go back, I think they probably go back to the 70s. Sometimes you can get the paper for free, but you at least get to review the abstract 90% of the time. And the abstract will talk about the subjects, the methodology, which then is very clear about the dosing, sometimes, and then the results, and then the conclusion of discussion. And that would be...
There's actually an iPhone app for that, too. The problem is, though, again, the problem is usually you only get the abstract.
Yeah.
And it does, but that may be good enough because it'll do just a slight description of what's going on and then a basic conclusion. And you can then see if that's something you really want to look into. But then you got to get a hold of it. So that's another challenge.
The only source I know of is Penn State Sportsman newsletter. They actually publish where you can go to find out what the study, what the parameters of the study is. But I haven't seen too many articles that actually show where you can go to find out what they did. You don't know if it was 70-year-old or 20-year-old.
Yeah, the abstract, we'll talk about that. It'll say, and it's brief, not a lot of adverbs in there. It's like prepositions, 16, 21-year-old males of age, average age, blah, blah, blah. VO2 max of 55 plus or minus 13. I mean, it gets pretty specific. There's a little, so you just kind of type in, you get your abstract, and on the side you can hit review, and it'll bring up all the review articles for that topic you typed in. So arginine supplementation and exercise, and it might have been published 2 years ago. That's data. It takes a year to publish a paper, and it took a year to write the paper, so it's already probably 2 years old. But it at least gives you a review. Because arginine is very common for cardiovascular patients, post bypass or have current issues with heart to help with vasodilation. So there are a lot of other health benefits you might find. But you'll get the rat studies, you'll get the human studies, dog studies, whatever they've done. 20 on a page of studies.
So still you have to decide what's going to work. You pick
Right.
a study and you think you're going to go with it. And
Right. Right. You pick one that was published 2 months ago, and it looks good. The first page shows positive results, but the 5 pages previous to that you went to look at were all negative results. So sometimes it's difficult, because that's part of research, right? Eat the egg, don't eat the egg. Eat butter, don't eat butter, blah, 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 blah. And that's all this new research that comes out, new ways to measure things, methodologies improved. We find out, blood's not the best place. It needs to be in urine, or those sorts of things. And that changes and allows us to potentially contradict previous research. And so we have to be a bit mindful of that. That's why I like the review, because they'll get you both in many categories. You might get arginine that has one category of exercise, but multiple categories of chronic diseases.
The best description I always saw about studies was like looking at a chessboard piece. I mean, it's just one small isolated square. It doesn't show anything that came too much into it or anything that goes out of it. It's just like we were talking about, you could take this and the result was possibly this. And it's for averages too. It's not even individuals. It's just the average of the study. So if they did, 50 people or 35 people, you're just going to get averages, not what happens to each individual person.
Right, and some of these studies are pretty detailed too, so you're lucky to get more than 20 involved in the study too. So exercise testing is very time consuming. You've got to control the cyclist who doesn't want to be controlled on when they can and cannot be on their bike and what they can and cannot eat. It's like pulling teeth. And so you're stuck with 10 and you're bargaining with them. So, which you don't see until you actually print the paper, and you may not get the paper. So there's a couple of studies that, and here's an example of the methodology was their name of their supplement, but there was, it's all proprietary kind of ingredients. So what does that mean to
and who
my
funded the
application?
study? That's
The
always a
company,
good one.
exactly. Everyone,
So that's why we're so skeptical when you go to Yahoo News and you all of a sudden you read, they cite one study, they put a little article about it, and they come to this conclusion, and it just spreads like wildfire over the internet.
Right, right.
It's crazy. It's absolutely
But last
crazy.
month's study that said no has long been forgotten. Right. So it's this whole part is difficult. We see research. It's ideally research is very controlled. You have to compare the subjects to yourself. Ideally, they should be controlling part of the diet for some of these supplements too, because there can be a lot of nutrients. Arginine, soy contains arginine. So you got a vegetarian in there, it's probably got already a lot of arginine. You added more, they might even have bigger changes. Maybe they don't have any changes. So it's a lot of challenges to that. Anyone been a research subject before? You want to comment on?
There's for caffeine and its effects on cyclists. So it's a controlled study for 2 weeks, and we came in an hour a day at different rates. Our VO2 max was measured before and after, and nobody in the study knew whether they were getting caffeine or not.
Oh, okay.
So,
And did you have to do diet recalls with that? Did you have to control how much exercise you did the day before?
we had to have we had to keep a journal, and he wanted us to hit certain calorie amounts, and he had protein, carbohydrate, fat listed, and certain types of that. And it was interesting. It said that there was a 60% chance that it made a difference in VO2 max improvement, but it was only a 2-week study.
2 weeks.
So yeah, and it was a guy's dissertation too. So I don't put anything behind it as far as weight goes because it was a 2-week study. I mean, it was done on cyclists, and there was supposedly 25 of them, but.
Were you told to control your caffeine intake?
Yes, you weren't supposed to drink anything outside of it.
There's certain supplements that may
water,
take
as far as that goes.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, then are you a caffeine drinker? Is the other one a non-caffeinated drinker? Because sometimes those results are different too. That someone who is chronic intake versus someone who's never had it, is there going to be a factor?
There was a questionnaire about that too before that.
We'll talk about caffeine too. So branched-chain amino acids have become very popular in the sports arena. We have Perpetuum, we have Accelerate, Excel gels with branched-chain amino acids. Initially, probably 5 years ago, there was this big hype about branched chain amino acids because the idea was that we could delay the onset of fatigue by changing serotonin release from the brain. So you can go longer, harder on your bike, maybe do a time trial faster, or you're able to ride the bike for a longer period of time before your cadence falls off as part of a research study because branched chain amino acids are reducing that serotonin release. The research has backed off from that. It's not as convincing. However, the research has definitely picked up with branched chain amino acid supplementation and the reduction of muscle damage. Very big. And here's kind of the challenge around branched chain amino acids. When you're consuming branched chain amino acids during exercise, plus carbohydrate, you just have another source of calories, right? So you now have a gel that has 25 grams of carbs and 7 grams of protein, branched chain amino acids. You just got yourself another 28 calories. So is it the calories that may be providing some of the performance benefits of branched chain amino acids? There was some controversy over trying, how do you control that? Well, you got to give someone a gel that has the same nitrogen content, it's not the branched chain amino acids, versus the gel with the branched chain amino acids, and trying that wasn't very well studied. However, if you just look at branched chain amino acid supplementation, there's a lot of valuable research stating during exercise, the consumption of branched chain amino acids during long bouts of physical activity, we see less muscle damage. And that's pretty common. Used as a source of fuel, potentially using less of your own amino acids. Glutamine, as an example, is a source of energy as well. So the central fatigue idea has been backed off a little bit. I definitely feel like there's more calories, right? You're on your bike for 5 hours, getting a few extra calories helps from that standpoint. We'll talk about at the next talk too, but we can only absorb so much carbohydrate per hour. So we have another route of energy that's not reliant on saturated glucose transporters. So it's another source of fuel. However, 7 to 14 grams of supplementation per day has shown to reduce markers related to muscle damage in cyclists, runners, pretty common. So definitely popular. The products they'll taste different. Has anyone tried some of those, branched chain amino acid supplements with Accelerate as an example? I highly recommend it for people who are doing long bouts of physical activity. Typical triathlete that has multiple hours. They're on their bike. They're doing a brick, their bike run, or whatever they're doing, swim, run stuff. So, and cyclists that are multiple hours out there would benefit from getting more. You're doing a spin for an hour. You're going out on the trail for an hour and a half. Probably don't need that particular. Not that it's bad, but it's definitely going to benefit from the long.
Do you recommend it daily and then during training?
During training is where this would benefit most, is the branched chain amino acid supplements. So in that in particular, the gels are also. Question is how much is in the gel versus what would be beneficial. Yeah.
What is it called when you're looking at the ingredients?
They typically advertise on there that there's branched chain amino acids, or you can potentially assume there's some in there looking at the protein content, and then the ingredient list should have the three, leucine, isoleucine, and valine as the 3 branched chain amino acids.
But you have no idea what their quantities.
Right. Right. They're not. They may or may not list the grams. Some do, and some don't.
Is that different than maltodextrin?
Yes, maltodextrin is glucose, and these are amino acids.
Because a lot of the, like Cytomax is not maltodextrin.
Right. Totally separate. We'll talk about that too, because there's interesting research around different sugars that are, in addition to the branched chain amino acids, can be a great source of it, or are a great source of energy.
Is there a way to get the branched chain amino acids where you know how much you're getting?
Typically, you can buy them in pill form, so if you want to try and pop them while you're training, that's an option. But there are, I think I haven't looked at Excel Gel in a while in the Accelerate, but I think they do have the label on there of how much that's in there. And I think Perpetuum has it in there too, but I haven't looked at it recently to know the grams.
I mean, the protein, is it?
Yeah.
So the protein is all branched chain?
No. You can't guarantee that. I don't know. We don't know. You can call. call, they actually are mandated to have that information in customer calls, how much branched chain amino acid content you have per gel or per scoops to get that information. Androgens, growth hormone stuff. Thought I'd talk about some of these. Again, we're talking about oral supplementations, not injectable stuff. And androgens secreted by the adrenal glands, converted to testosterone. Testosterone is certainly a factor in muscle development. And so our goal for more testosterone is obviously more muscle mass. Hence why men have lower body fats. It's also because of their testosterone levels compared to women. Although some studies show the opposite. So again, we see both sides of that. But most of the time when it comes to these oral supplementations, we don't necessarily get the effect we're trying to attain from them. We can't really compare oral versus injectable. It's just, you're not going to get the same anabolic effect in particular. So some of the studies that did support the claim was anywhere from 100 to 300 milligrams per day. The problem is, and this is why women have lower heart disease risk, is because we have less testosterone. So, yeah, more testosterone, more muscle tissue, less fat tissue, but you have a lower heart HDL, which is why most common in men. Anyway, physical activity can improve that. We get into, well, you think estrogens make testosterone, well, testosterone can make estrogen. So, you want to go up on a cup size and hang out at Victoria's Secret, that's a potential side effect as well for men. And you're talking about compounds that are correlated with cancers, right? Prostate cancer, testicular cancer. So we have to be mindful. And I'll show you a chart in a second how that works out. DHEA is along the same lines of kind of being an androgen, anabolic. The idea of converting it to androsteinedione to then convert it to testosterone, have more muscle mass. There's really no evidence for that, and it too obviously has some safety issues. And the reason being is this particular chart. So the idea is if we push more into here, we push more into here, we push more into here, do we go here? Maybe not a good idea. This direction too. The body does do a pretty good job of regulating this. However, the idea is that if we do more here, we can have more testosterone and there's side effects, which are possible benefits. But I put this here, the FDA issued a public health advisory in 2009 highlighting the risks of these products in relationship to their health concerns and being a bit mindful about their use. Yeah.
For an endurance athlete, I mean, is this just for building like muscle mass, or is there?
This is for the muscle mass. So again, cyclists, muscle mass, don't want muscle mass. You want it, but you don't. So just being, and sometimes, I mean, maybe if you've got some powdered stuff at home, you might want to take a good look at it. You might find this in there. You might find a gram or two of creatine in there. So do you really want that part of your supplementation? Amino acids, again, we talked about growth hormone release. I'm not talking about injection of growth hormone, but branched chain amino acids have been shown. Arginine, ornithine, and glutamine have also been factors in improving growth hormone release. Therefore, growth hormone has its benefits of protein synthesis, may help with recovery, also help with overall muscle. There's some argument it also improves the immune system too. But again, dose 0.5 grams or 30 grams.
5 ounces.
So it's big difference. And usually they're also kind of a compilation of all of these that have the most impact on the release of growth hormone.
Marlia,
Yeah.
could you talk about, I'm a little confused about free-form amino acids. I've heard a rumor that if you have free-form amino acids present in your blood while muscle tissue is breaking down, it actually helps immediately repair the muscle tissue rather than going through the whole breakdown of protein process.
Well, we have to think about the physiological state of what's going on. So if we have protein breakdown, we're in a catabolic state. We're not in an anabolic state. And so we have hormones that are trying to break down things. We have hormones that are breaking down glycogen to glucose to energy. We have hormones breaking down fat to fatty chain, small chains to ATP. But we don't have like insulin that's trying to repair and put these amino acids where they need them and put the carbohydrate back into the glycogen stores. So in a state of catabolism, the catabolic hormones like epinephrine, glucagon are overriding the anabolic hormones. So if there's more amino acids in the area of the muscle tissue during physical activity, the idea is that we're not going to be breaking down some of that muscle tissue for a source of energy because we have plenty of free amino acids as a source of energy. And so you're not necessarily going to be utilizing those as part of the building. There is some argument, though, about getting some extra protein prior to strength training, physical activity, bodybuilding, that you can reduce the damage. But you're not really building it during a catabolic phase. I think you're just providing a pool rather than dipping into your own availability during that phase. And growth hormone, do I need to say more? We don't consume growth hormone and expect it to be growth hormone by the time it gets obliterated by your stomach acid, broken down by your pancreas and its enzymes into the blood, and think it's going to reform itself. Growth hormones or hormones are proteins. We break them down, we absorb each individual one, and once it's in the blood, it doesn't reassemble. It's just like, does a diabetic consume insulin? No. They take metformin, glyburide, Actose. They don't glucophage, they don't consume insulin. They inject insulin. It's a hormone. So we can't just think we're going to consume hormone and get the physiological effect of an injectable. Coenzyme Q has been a real common one that I hear a lot for heart patients, but also it acts as an antioxidant. And again, with physical activity, we have a lot of oxidation from free radicals that you're generating in physical activity from what you're breathing in as the car zooms past you, from just the nice air that's hovered in the valley for the last 30 days in August. So the idea would be that studies have shown with coenzyme Q supplementation, we have better endurance, reduced muscle damage, and reduced overall oxidative stress, which really can also then mean you're a few steps ahead on the recovery component of your goal. But has also shown to reduce performance. So, hard to say. I was pretty surprised by that, but there's definitely some contraindication between studies of actual performance benefits. But again, this goes back to untrained versus trained. So you can certainly give this a try. There's certainly been no safety concerns, but you can try that. Quercetin, I see this a lot on, MSN sort of blog stuff. And I typed it in, PubMed, quercetin, supplementation, performance, look stuff up, and really, you're a rodent, maybe, again, you feed a rodent hundreds of milligrams per kilo, and you get grams and grams and grams per kilo, so the idea is you really don't get enough. Definitely some contradictory results. The studies that did show a trend used 1,000 milligrams a day. Those that showed no performance used 1,000 milligrams a day. So, however, quercetin, aside from performance, has shown to reduce heart disease. It's what's in your apples, in your onions, as a flavonoid and antioxidant. So it does have health benefits. You just may not get a performance benefit. Other antioxidants, vitamin C, vitamin E, beta-carotene. We have vitamin C that's water-soluble. It acts as an antioxidant in the water parts of your cells. You have vitamin E that's fat-soluble, so it has an antioxidant in your fat part of your cells. The confusion is, do they need more or do they not need more? There's a little bit of research that does suggest that some supplementation is reduced, again, oxidative damage related to exercise, reducing muscle soreness has been a factor too, and thus both of these would be a factor in your recovery. The vitamin C is 250 to 500 milligrams per day. Has been a benefit, and about 600 international units of vitamin K. Caffeine, along with endurance. We'll talk a little bit about the next class too, but boy, you really couldn't find an article that disputes caffeine as a performance-enhancing supplement. It's shown to improve carbohydrate absorption at the gut, which is rate-limiting. It's shown to improve carbohydrate utilization, improve fat utilization. A lot of military studies look at caffeine and alertness, their ability to do tests after being up for 48 hours. You'll see improved performance, length of time to exhaustion is improved, and increased VO2 max as well. The research has also evaluated the dehydration component of caffeine, and during exercise, assuming you have good kidney function, can not be affected by the dehydration of the caffeine. So the timing of that's important, right? You want to have some coffee before your race, hit the porta potty, get in line, hit the porta potty, and then race. But if you consume caffeine during that, you're not going to have, you shouldn't have to go to the bathroom, or the kidney is going to compensate because of so much sweat loss.
I read something recently that was talking about caffeine takes 12 hours for a half-life to get half of the stuff out of your system.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, heck, if I drink this stuff all day long, that why does it affect me at night because I'm neutral to it? So then would you really get any performance out of it?
Good question. So caffeine has a half-life of 4 hours. And there has been some discussion around chronic users versus newbies. And if you look at some of the performance on this end, there's not a lot of difference between the two. I think the downside, though, is somebody who doesn't consume caffeine may have a bit more palpitations, possibly changes in blood pressure and heart rate. But usually the research still supports whether someone's been a chronic user or not, have the benefits of caffeine supplementation. However, like this gentleman mentioned, you do a washout period prior to your participation in the study. You're asked to not consume caffeine for 24 hours, which has its own downside. You're taking Tylenol, but yeah, you can still do both and have both groups can still benefit. Absolutely.
Excuse me, but
yes.
As in Italian, caffeine is my subject.
So is pasta.
No. The point is, number one, it is a drug, and as such, if found in any athlete above a certain level, that athlete is discarded.
Yeah.
And out. So you have to really, even with caffeine, be very regulated and not to go above.
Yes, we have to consume a lot to obtain that.
They don't test master athletes.
Yeah, they don't test master athletes. There's an interesting article about master athletes dabbling in the drug. The trick is really how much. I mean, there's some studies that look at 1 milligram per kilo per hour. Other studies did 5 to 13 milligrams. Your typical grande Starbucks coffee is 320 or 70 milligrams of caffeine. Your shots, usually 60 milligrams. Your typical gel is 50 milligrams of caffeine. Your no-dose is 20. Now, I tell this story all the time about Judd. Judd, our bike fit, exercise physiologist, sports medicine, took a no-dose in the middle of a criterium and flatted out. Yeah. He was high as a kite for a while afterwards because he wasn't able to really utilize. So you have to kind of give some consideration to that. Now, if aside from that, if you're sensitive to caffeine, you have your heart races, it's really not worth trying to introduce this for the performance benefits because nobody wants to attend your funeral having a heart attack out there. Pyruvate, again, another metabolite, metabolism, thought to potentially improve endurance. There's definitely a lot of mixed results. This is an example of the dose is 7 to 25 grams per day, but it's sold in a half a gram tablet. So, to me, that's just kind of a fraud. Medium chain triglycerides have been looked at for endurance too. Minimal looked at both 40 grams versus 20 grams, showing no difference in glycogen breakdown. The idea would be you have more free fat for use as a source of energy. Your glycogen stores are limited, so you might be able to spare these, but there's really no research that supports that, and there's some that actually shows reduction in performance, and again, going back to previous discussion, it also shown increased acid production in the body. So the idea seems right, but it actually physiologically doesn't happen that way. Supplements in the sense of multivitamins, B complex. This is an example of a supplement, and I put the percentages of the daily value on there. And looking at the literature, there's really no added benefit from B vitamins. The argument is that one, studies aren't long enough, and two, you guys usually eat enough. So your Clif Bar has B vitamins, your bagel has B vitamins, you're usually eating enough food with B vitamins. Do you need to take something of this nature? And we were going to send this out, but you can, it's online, but we can send it to your PDF. The dietary reference intakes, upper limits, what's recommended, and so the upper limit so there's no upper limit for thiamine and riboflavin. These are water soluble, so you get to pee all 10,000% out. Pretty fluorescent, very expensive urine. And then the niacin, upper limit for niacin for males is 35. For women, it's also 35. So here's niacin. The upper limit is 35. So we've already
35 grams or 35 milligrams?
35 milligrams. B6, the upper limit for B6 is 100. So they're right there on that one. For folate, the upper limit's 1,000, so they're being lenient on that. B12 does not have an upper limit at this point. However, this is the B vitamin you actually store. Your liver stores B12. So consuming this plus whatever you're getting in your diet, does that have consequences on your liver long term?
Milligrams, NCG?
Micro, a little G.
What
Yeah.
is the B12, what's the negative effect of having too much B12 in your
At
liver?
this point, it's not well studied. No, there's no established, and these were established pretty recently. They go back to about 2000, and there's really no changes in the upper limit.
And then now this is only in performance athletes, not necessarily in just somebody who doesn't.
This is the average Joe.
Okay.
These are so the recommendation for these, not the upper limit, talking about just the daily requirements, are meant to meet 99% of the population. Its goal is to get you 2 standard deviations away from the mean of basic requirements. So you're getting more just by meeting the recommendation because it exceeds the mean. But many of these supplements are thousands of percentages above that. But at this point, there's no research that supports for athletes that they need any more of this. And there's more and more discussion in papers about we don't even need a multivitamin. There are actually minimal health benefits to that. I think it really depends on the person. But it does make sense that they would need more because all those B vitamins are part of the production of ATP. So you have the glucose, you have the fat. They actually need to go through the whole rigmarole, and that requires B vitamins. But, what happens, is there a benefit from long-term use? Can we do a study of years of supplementation and actually show a benefit in performance? That's not been done at this point. But, in the big scheme, do we actually need 2,000% of the requirements? When typically, when I do food records, everyone's meeting 200 to 300% just from food. So, something to think about. However, general health, a couple of changes in recommendations recently. Last month, calcium and vitamin D recommendations went up from 1,000 to 1,300 milligrams. Your typical 1 cup of milk is 300 milligrams. Your cup of yogurt is 250. Your ounce of cheese is 150. So if you're not doing a lot of dairy, Soy milk's cup's about 300 milligrams too. Tofu's about 15, 20% per ounce. So if you're not getting enough calcium, and cycling's not a weight-bearing sport, in the interest of your bones, it's important to think about supplementation. Vitamin D recommendations just went up from 400 international units to 600, with people still shouting it wasn't enough. Vitamin D important for bone density, but the last 5 to 8 years we see a lot of valuable research about vitamin D supplementation and the reduction of cancers. Colon cancer being one of them, a little bit on breast cancer as well. So something to consider. And then omega-3s are essential fat that we don't typically get enough of. You don't make it, so you have to get it from the diet. The general recommendation is 1.2 grams per day. I do food evals and it's like half a gram, unless someone's taking a tablet or doing flaxseed and walnuts purposely for omega-3s. Omega-3s are basically an anti-inflammatory fat. It targets products or enzymes in the blood to reduce platelet stickiness, which basically reduces clotting, but other anti-inflammatory components such as cancer, and there's some discussion about omega-3 supplementation in dementia. So I think you're not going to get a performance benefit from it, but it's certainly something to think about for your overall health. Now, stepping backwards, fish oil supplements may have mercury. So, you know, flaxseed. So the omega-3s, your two most potent ones are EPA and DHEA, and they're found in fish. Flaxseed meal, walnuts, canola oil have ALA, which is one step metabolically behind EPA and DHA. So the assumption is you consume ALA and you make EPA or DHA. Maybe, maybe not, but the ALA still has health benefits too. So when it comes to fish oil, that's really the potent fatty acids. So let's eat salmon, watch the mercury. It's a tough balance. You know, then you're paying a price for wild versus farmed. The FDA, I should say the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, still recommends, as part of their recommendation for overall health, that you are safe to consume 2 4-ounce servings of fish per week and not be at risk of high mercury intake. Anyone know what 4 ounces looks like? Small. It's like, you know, a calculator kind of thing. It's, you know, the cost goes like this. It's chopped up. Yeah, small. Deck of cards is 3 ounces. Yeah.
Yeah, your palm.
About.
Marlene? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask if there's an upper limit for vitamin D, omega-3, and calcium.
Good question. The calcium upper limit is 2,000 milligrams, and the vitamin D is 50 micrograms, which is...
That's a pretty small window, huh? 13? Did you say 2,000 for calcium?
Yeah.
That's only 1,300.
Or I'm sorry, it's 2,500 for calcium. Yeah, 2.5 grams. So you can OD on the calcium component. The vitamin D, they have recommendations in here as the micrograms, and if I'm correct, it's like, it would be 15 times this.
So, I mean, there's no worry about if you're riding in the sun for 8 hours a day, wearing spandex, skin cancer.
Well, yeah, if you're wearing sunscreen, then you're not making vitamin D. But the production of vitamin D is also pretty well regulated, too.
Is there one for omega-3?
No, there's not. No. In fact, I mean, if you read Michael Pollan, it's all about our ratios totally off between omega-3s and omega-6, and you can certainly do more than 4 grams a day, certainly. The health benefits that the research is 2 to 4 grams, but you can do more than that. Unless you have a blood clotting problem, then I don't know, be careful. So supplement-wise, you can definitely do some of these. You know, I just saw a Nature Made product the other day that was fish oil at Costco that was advertising that it had checked the mercury content. And you can call them up and have them send you that information. They're really supposed to have that available for you to help make a decision. You know, anti-inflammatory, will it reduce some of your joint pain? maybe, but it's definitely a health benefit. Definitely a health benefit. Certainly along joints, glucosamine is probably one of the more popular ones for reduction in joint pain. It doesn't necessarily protect your joint from overuse, but it may reduce some of the pain by helping with a little bit of the production of some of the cartilage and the tendons in that area. Those cells turn over very, very, very slowly. So supplementation may take a couple of months before you just see actually a change in pain. Many patients and clients I've worked with have a lot of benefit from this. The idea, though, is what is the pain? Is it actually a tendon, cartilage, or is it an ACL that's completely torn? Is it something that's more than just a basic tear or microfiber discrepancy? So something to consider. Well tolerated. Patients that tolerate it, you can see a lot of the research that definitely shows benefit from glucosamine. Chondrotin as well, but most of glucosamine.
Is there an upper limit for those?
There is not. There is not. So these aren't like the typical vitamin and mineral to have that being studied. But as I finish here, we can't forget getting the food. Yeah, there's some ideas around extra arginine, extra this, extra that, but if you're not eating well, the arginine's not going to do much for you anyway. If you're not getting enough protein, your creatine's not going to be a big factor. You can take all this and not really have optimal training and really not see the benefits. So your whole food's always the best option. B vitamins, antioxidants are usually met through food. Maybe a little extra supplementation, but for the most part, athletes do pretty well on their food intake and meet their vitamin and mineral needs. So supplementation isn't always necessary. It may be more food intolerances. Gluten intolerance is an example. B vitamins might be a concern. Lactose intolerance, milk allergy might be concerned for protein, also for calcium and vitamin D. So some of those things, but for the most part, making good food choices, we do pretty well meeting needs.
So what do you recommend people to do to see if and what they need a supplement? What do you recommend?
Well, is this where I plug myself? Usually, sometimes if I'm with a patient or a client, I'll do a food recall and just get an idea of frequency of food consumption. But I also do sports medicine here with Bruce 3-day food records. I look at your intake, I plug it into a computer program, and I get estimates of your intake, your averages. Now, these nutrients, vitamins, minerals, are actually, they're 2 standard deviation recommendation away from the mean, so you should be meeting requirements. However, they're also supposed to be met over several days. It doesn't have to be 100% perfectly every day. But it's that program that I can see how your B12 is, how your zinc, your iron, those sorts of things to assess. And then maybe make some recommendations. Certainly the challenges behind that is we might eat seasonally. So right now, fruit, slim, so there might be some changes in intake. Nobody really wants a cold salad right now, so folate and vitamin K might be a little bit different. So that has to be taken into account, too. But I look at a lot of things, like we've talked about in my first class, your distribution of your calories, your composition of your meals, in the back. Yeah.
What about potassium?
Boy, you have to be really careful with that. You do lose some potassium through heavy sweating, but boy, potassium supplementation, you really have to have a medical need for that because too much potassium can cause a cardiac arrest. So, again, how much are you consuming? You've taken a little pill and it's 40 milligrams, no big deal, but it's you're taking 1,000, that's a big deal. Potassium supplementation isn't the big deal when it comes to replacement in the sense of we usually are looking at sweat and replacement of electrolytes. A lot of it's